Greetings, everyone. My name is Tom Caswell, and this is the Hit the Limit Break podcast, the podcast that steps away from the daily news cycle around gaming to look at gaming's future, to look at the puzzle by speaking to those who are crafting the puzzle pieces. This week, I am joined by video game consultant and content creator Persephone Valentine. Persephone, how are you today?
I'm great. It's good to see you again.
It's good to see you again. Yes, for listeners, we actually recorded last week, but unfortunately we had some technical issues. So Persephone graciously...
It's fine. You just get tortured with my lovely face again.
I mean, look,
this man's had to listen to this voice and face twice in 2 weeks. Like, there are... torture is supposed to be illegal by the Geneva Convention.
Look, did I feign technical issues just so I could look at your face again? Potentially. We'll never know.
Honey, if you did that, you need to raise your standards. Seriously. Self-love and self-care are very valuable in this world.
It's hard in this day and age, honestly. You know, the draw to masochism is strong. Before we get stuck in, thank you everyone so much for watching, for tuning in. If you're new to the podcast, please head to limitbreaknetwork.com. That is going to give you everything you need to know. There's an FAQ there to explain what this podcast is about, what the network is about. You can see my interviews with past guests as well. And there's even some posts that take some of the highlights and put them in a really brief article. So you can just kind of, get caught up to speed on where we are in chatting with everyone. I've had two devs on previously, and I'm very excited to speak to Persephone about what it's like in the consultant and the content creation side of gaming. So before we get stuck into just questions about you, Persephone, there are 5 questions. Stop me if you've heard this before. I have 5 questions that we ask everyone on the podcast.
Jeez, it sounds so familiar.
Yeah.
I wonder why. Did I dream it?
Yeah. Let's see if you can, how your answers line up. So the first question is from when you started in the gaming industry to now. What is the biggest change that you have experienced in that time that isn't necessarily very obvious?
Well, I mean, people get more and more and more angry about things. I've been a gamer all of my life that I can remember. I've been a gamer. I started, I think, when I was 3 or 4. So but as far as the professional aspects of it, going from being someone who just partook in games personally and had thoughts about them like everyone else does, but to going on the internet, to seeing and engaging with video games discourse, and then to contributing to the greatest evil of all time to be inflicted on gaming, which is DEI. As a profession or part of my profession, the scope of emotions around games has definitely become more fertile for growth. Let's put it that way.
I like that. That's a great way to put it. We're definitely going to obviously be jumping more into that when we get stuck into your career and what you do in the space. So we'll get back to that in a bit. But next of the 5 questions is, if you weren't in gaming, if you weren't doing this as a profession, what would you be doing with your time?
Well, you see, Death Valley's not too far, and there are several cliffs and plateaus that I could leap off of.
Yep.
So I do think that that's where I would be.
Okay, the masochism coming back around. We're sprinkling it on top.
Look, I mean, I had the realization, after we talked, I was thinking about it. I was like, I literally don't remember a time in my life before video games, because I started just as I was starting to remember and be conscious of life.
Yeah.
Some of my first memories are of
I was going to ask, what are your earliest gaming memories?
Oh God. So my mom, this was a console for the house that became mine. Got used Nintendo, the original Nintendo, and was playing The Legend of Zelda, and realized that, it holds this little ADHD-ridden monster's attention. Okay, let's see that. So Legend of Zelda was my first, then Final Fantasy, which became one of my favorites. Hated the first Final Fantasy, despised it as a child. And then I got my own console, my own first console, which was a Sega Genesis. And then I played games oh God. These, I still have them.
Oh, that's beautiful.
To this day. I don't have all of them, but Crystal's Ponytails was the first one. That's a My Little Pony rip. Oh God, that's something else. I have 2 copies of the New Adventures of Pac-Man. Which
Classics.
is a sin against humanity. The fact that even 2 copies exist, God, that game's infuriating.
Yeah,
that game made me throw a controller for the first time. I'm pretty sure the first time I ever threw a controller as a Rachel kid was because of that game.
It might have also been that the Genesis controller fucking sucks as well. You were
Oh God,
like,
it was so. It was somehow like. Like the only thing I can compare it to is the first Xbox controller. Like, it was over-engineered and terrible.
Yeah, 100%.
But I mean, a lot of controllers.
You could see what they were going for, but they really just like
could you
missed
see
the mark.
what the N64 controller was going for? Because I still to this day don't know.
Don't get me started on it. Don't get me started on the GameCube controller. I know there are defenders out there.
GameCube was way better than the N64 controller. Like, it was a massive improvement.
It's a step up, but it's still, it has a lot to do with, like, I just didn't own those consoles for sure. But when I play the N64 one, I'm like, did someone with 3 hands make this? Like, why is it like this?
Someone was going through something with that design. I will say that, like, as far as controllers go, I mean, the PlayStation controller emerged from the womb perfect, basically. They added vibration functions, but like, and like some touchpad stuff, but virtually the main design has not really changed for PlayStation controllers since the 90s.
So you're a symmetrical thumbstick person, or you do prefer asymmetrical, like an Xbox?
I'm a symmetrical thumbstick person.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, I know. I'm weird. I'm weird. I like to have some symmetry in my life. My boobs and my face couldn't match that. So, like, I have to have the controller, you know?
Yeah. No, 100%. I get that. Well, not to the extent that you might, but yeah.
Hey, everyone's a little uneven somewhere.
Oh, trust me. Anyway, next question. Yeah, shake that however you want, ladies and gents.
Shake that?
Yeah,
okay.
Shake that thing. Okay, is there a game recently that you have played that you feel is emblematic of the future of video games? And if so, what is it and why?
BG3.
Yes.
Baldur's Gate 3.
Yes, we talked about this. So much
for
to
as
say.
glitchy and wonky and weird as it can be, and how much the combat takes several hours, I mean, it's an emblem of like the changes in games that have been put in through like further emphasis on character, emphasis on diversity, like story. Like, the story of BG3 is great. It's wonderful. Yeah. Like, all of the sort of like narrative elements of Baldur's Gate 3 are very, very, very good and very technically savvy, even if the rest of the game, you know, it's not a perfect game. No game is perfect, but like as far as those elements, it's definitely, I think, an emblem for what we should want from gaming in the future.
And it definitely, I think also, and correct me from your standpoint if you feel differently about this, but like, I think, you know, that is a game that has a lot of, you know, DEI elements, a lot of inclusivity and diverse elements. And they're so well done and intrinsically well done that, like, it's almost like Teflon for the haters. Like, no, everyone loves BG3 despite it being, you know, very...
I don't think it's necessarily Teflon.
No, you think... maybe I'm not seeing some comments out there. Maybe I'm completely...
No, there are people that have complained about a number of elements about sort of the inclusion of characters of different races and stuff like that. Okay. Like, no matter what, you're not going to please everyone.
Of course.
But I do think that what Baldur's Gate 3 shows is that, like, DEI is not something that is shoehorned in or forced necessarily. Like, it can just be part of the narrative, and these characters can just exist.
Yeah.
Like, that's the main issue, I think, with a lot of the discourse around DEI, which is diversity, equity, inclusion for any of you. All of these words are good things, generally. The main argument against it is that it is changing what games look like, or that it's basically forcing diversity where it shouldn't necessarily be. In which case, I'm sorry to inform a lot of you people, this may scare you, but Black people and queer people exist in real life, and therefore can exist in game spaces.
Yeah. And like I said, definitely going to get back to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that later.
There's a whole meaty chunk that we could dive right into. But before that...
So much meat.
We just cannot help ourselves. Man. Okay, so... you know, you talked a lot about, you know, obviously BG3 is a game you really enjoyed recently, and then you talked about Zelda and FF1, despite it being a game that you don't necessarily enjoy, being some early memories. But what gaming memory would you wipe so that you could replay the game again fresh?
Persona 5 Royal.
Yes.
Persona 5 specifically. Actually, if we could just wipe Persona 5 entirely, so I could just play Royal, that'd be great.
What a monkey's paw that would be if you were like wipe Persona 5 Royal from my memory, but you still had the memory of Persona 5. You're like, ah!
That is like a genie ass thing. It's like, oh, you'll still remember P5, and I'm just like, but, honestly, I would replay. Like, if you could erase the entire Persona series, I think 3 is not my favorite, but like 4 I've played even more than Royal just because it's a little shorter. But yeah, Persona 5 Royal, which like the Persona games are notorious for being expository as fuck. So like too much intro dialogue and stuff like that. But it's like a wonderful game, and it like adds elements of like sort of like transformation and thievery and like rebellion against people that are awful in the government. There's reasons I like that game a lot.
Which was your first Persona?
3.
Okay.
I've yet to play the first
2.
3 games.
Yeah, there's 2 2s, right?
Yeah, 2 2s, but yeah, which I know someone in the comments will be like, actually, there's 3 Persona games that are 1 and 2, and like you should know better. You're a fan of the series. That voice was like spot on. That was kind of really surreal to hear. I speak fluent neckbeard.
Okay, you can translate it.
Yeah,
gotcha.
I do. I did.
I love that. It's a good
I should
talent.
just say I'm not quite fluent in Reddit, but I'm like fluent in neckbeard, so it's like sort of the same thing.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's on the resume for sure. For your time in the industry, do you think this is the most tumultuous time in video games?
Well, given the amount of layoffs and the size of the game industry, the amount of discourse that's going on around it and stuff, it might be the most tumultuous to date, but definitely not the most tumultuous ever. I think that it's going to get worse. And I think there will be periods where it's worse or better, depending. But it comes like we are in like it's like I would say about like 10 or 15 years ago is when the sort of like the idea of gaming and the idea of games started to have a cultural shift towards like these aren't just games, this is an entire form of media that people are really, aggressively participating in, that can be discussed in the same way that movies and books and stuff like that are. And with that comes a massive shift of discourse and criticism and things like that. So I do think that this is a very tumultuous time because we're starting to see both more inclusion and more pushback. We're seeing a ton of games layoffs because, in part because, video game companies are awful at managing things and they shouldn't be doing this, but also because of the massive growth from the pandemic and sort of like the pressure cooker that it was because people are home and they needed ways to distract themselves from the fact that they couldn't leave their homes during lockdown. So games had a massive like growth. Like just look at Animal Crossing, like exploding. Would that have happened without the pandemic? Absolutely not.
Probably not.
It's a popular series, but not that much.
Not to that level. Not to that degree. Yeah.
And we're seeing a lot of layoffs because they're scaling down now. And such because the games that were in development during the pandemic are now being released.
Right.
So it is a combination of things that does make it very much a like pretty complicated time.
Yeah, it's definitely, when I was talking to Zalavir Nelson last week, and he was saying like in the previous like tumultuous times in gaming, there was usually like one big thing happening that made it tumultuous, and there was logical reasons as to why that was happening. And he talks like now it's on all fronts, and a lot of it stems from like a complete lack of logic. These studios, when they're laying people off, how they develop their games is lacking logic. Obviously, the cultural response from a lot of people who are condemning, increased inclusion and diversity and equity in games.
It used to be that the biggest deal that could happen in gaming was that like, I don't know, and new IBM chip just dropped or some shit like that. Like that used to cause major problems. But now it's like, oh no, there's Black people in games, and oh no, if we make this really super hyper successful game, will we have jobs?
Yeah, it's
which is asinine,
a complete mess. But yeah, so yeah, it's one though that I hope that we can try and navigate through, and I do think, a lot of the reason why I made this podcast was because I do ultimately have optimism for the future of gaming. It's just going to, and continues to, and will continue to have a lot of pain attached to it. We actually equated it to kind of like the collapse of the, movies went through a very similar thing in their heyday. So you had like movies booming, through, voiceless, the silent era of movies.
Then, silent film era, the silver screen, the golden age.
Exactly.
Stuff like that.
And
film
then
has gone through ups, highs, and lows.
And then, kind of collapsed like towards like the mid-century, and then like had another wave after that and found a way out in like the 80s. And like now, then movies were bigger than ever. And I do think in a lot of ways gaming will follow a similar kind of path. But yeah, it's going to be a lot of pain for a while. And hopefully this podcast can try and help people navigate people through that. Now, obviously, the future of games, as I think we can both agree, is hopefully one that is representative of more people. And of course, you consult, you do DEI consultancy for some games. And I just wanted, to kind of set the record straight on what exactly that kind of work looks like.
Oh, that is a big deal, because I think a lot of people think, like, they hear the term DEI and they think that some sort of consultant has come in and told them these characters need to be XYZ race and you can't do anything about it. That is not what happens. Usually we're brought in as consultants on characters that are already being intended to be of different races, different sexualities, different genders, stuff like that. Usually that's how we're brought on. There are some cases, rare cases, and this honestly should be more the norm, we're brought in the beginning when they want to start doing this work. And that's not necessarily been my experience. Usually a lot of the work has been done and I'm sort of telling them how they can improve or make it more authentic to sort of like the communities that they're trying to target. Which the other thing that a lot of people fail to recognize is that they don't have to take anything the DEI consultant says.
Right.
They don't. There's nothing ever saying that anyone who comes into work at DEI for a gaming company that they have to do exactly what we're telling them. We can inform them of things that will be that will cause them hate on the internet. We can inform them of things that aren't necessarily true or that are racist or sexist or homophobic or whatever across the board, but that doesn't mean they have to take our advice. And sometimes they don't. Generally, in my experience, they have, for the most part, in the gaming industry, but that doesn't always mean that they do. And like, people seem to think that like we have ultimate control over the games that come out, and we do not.
Right.
Not even a little bit. Not a single one of us does.
So when it comes to, talking about the different advice that you are giving, the different consulting that you're doing, do you find that when you come in on most projects that the kind of they're mostly there and you're just kind of like helping polish it in a way? Or do you come in a lot of the time and find like, oh my God, like there's a lot of work that needs to be done on this representation? Just kind of.
Yes. Both of those things can be true and often are. Like usually I come in and they have an idea of what they want. I've only consulted on a few projects thus far, and none of which are out yet. Right. I'm not even sure, even when they're out, if I'd have to review the contracts if I can talk about which games I've consulted on. But they're all still in development right now, because I've been doing DI consultation since it was before it was called that, in other industries, corporate industries and like TTRPGs and stuff for the last like redacted period of time. More than you think. I've been doing it basically since I was 19. But I've only recently started doing it in the games industry, so nothing's been released yet because game cycles take forever these days. But generally, when I've come in, they have an idea of what they want. They have the designs. They have a lot of things. And I get to come in and burst everyone's bubble and tell them, No. Usually, like, there has not been a situation where I've come in and haven't had something to say or haven't had a critique of something that needs to be improved. And I think that's part of the nature of the work that you do. Sometimes a lot of things that I do are just warning them, like, you're going to get critique about this and you need to be prepared for that or change it, sort of type of deal.
That's interesting that it's not necessary, you know, you're not kind of, in some cases, not even saying like, oh, you should change it this way. You're simply just notifying them of like, hey, like this character, the way that they're being portrayed, like, you know, that you might hear some blowback.
It depends. I am not always the softest pitch when it comes to this sort of things. Usually I'm like, this is wrong, fix it because XYZ reason. Because I don't know if you know those, but some people can be very sensitive when you take their baby and tell them that it needs to change. And a lot of the times I get pushed back because of that. And sort of like, I have to explain very well. And I've sort of been conditioned to explain very well that like, this is why this needs to change or why it should be changed. Knowing the entire time they can just say, Persephone, we don't really care. Which hasn't happened directly yet in gaming. It's happened in other industries. And they've reaped the reward of that at times. But like, that is the way it is. When you come on as a DEI consultant, you are not the writer. You are not the character designer. You're not one of the artists. You are literally coming in there to tell them how to sort of morph and fix and sort of make things more either true to life or just make it so that they don't piss as many people off in the community that they're portraying. And oftentimes that can receive some pushback, and they're also not guaranteed to take it.
What is the like time period for work like that? Like, are you with them for couple? Yeah,
it depends. Like, the most recent project that I'm on, I think I can say this. Like, I've only worked with them 10 hours thus far. 10 hours for the initial push of the project. There will likely be more later, but usually it's a contracted amount of hours. For me, sometimes there's longer term projects where you're basically on a retainer. Which not like a retainer, like they give you a certain portion of money or whatever, but you're basically on call for when they needed things, and then you invoice them based on that.
Gotcha.
So like, it depends on how involved they want you to be realistically. The last project that I did, they gave me the materials, I gave them my notes, and I haven't heard anything back yet. So
have you potentially worked on like a project for years, like you were there at start of development and they're still hitting you up at
not yet, waiting for that. Hopefully that comes. I have friends that have done that, and sort of those friends are the ones that when I got like my start in doing this sort of work, it's basically been referrals from people who are doing similar types of work for different types of groups and such. So like I have a friend who is on a project that I'm on that has been on there for 2 years now, consulting on different things. So yeah, it can happen. And honestly, it's the earlier you get your consultants in, the easier it is for everyone to stomach things, because you can sort of get it there on the ground floor and sort of help, not like help guide them towards what kind of portrayal they want realistically and the kind of things that they're trying to do if the creators are not of that background. You can sort of, it leads to a lot less bruised egos, I think, in many ways, because you sort of like, you hear what they want, then here's how you tell them how this is how you can accomplish that without making it seem like horrific, and then they can develop towards that. So
when we talked last, you talked about how despite there being a lot of studios embracing this kind of work and this kind of embracing being more inclusive, that there is still a sentiment in the industry from a number of studios that aren't embracing and are a little bit standoffish at the very. I think even when I said, now I'm remembering when I said standoffish, you were like a little bit firmer than.
It's not just standoffish. Yeah. There are game studios that are led by people that are actively against it and actively pushing for a less inclusion. But you have to keep in mind, video games are not a monolith industry. they are as affected by politics as everything else. In fact, the reason, like, I like to correct people of the notion that think just because a certain group is in a game that is political, people are political. Politics means people. That's why sort of the games industry is no exception to that, and or different politics. And people who are often in power at these companies tend to be very wealthy and can tend to be more conservative. Different companies are going to have different sort of leadership values, and therefore different companies will push back against this, even just internally. That is something that we are seeing. Even as certain companies embrace us, other companies will not. And like, that's not something I expect to go away. It's something that I expect to get worse in many ways.
Yeah.
You know,
you talked about, you know, I think I asked you essentially, like, how positive do you feel about the future of this kind of work, especially in the environment that we're currently in, where there's this torrent of hate on the internet? So
it's and I believe I told you it's complicated. I think it's going to get better and worse.
Pretty much.
I think that there's going to be groups that embrace it, and I think that there's going to be those who push back, and I think that that's going to be the case for as long as these arguments happen, which means probably forever. Like, I don't expect, not every game company is going to support having a trans character, for example. Like, we're gonna, and I believe I also said in our previous sort of no longer there discussion that I expect that we'll see a lot more games that sort of reflect this as development goes on, because like I said, game cycles are long, and some of the games that are developing during this discourse aren't out yet. I think we're gonna see a lot of games where it's very obvious that people are pushing back against diversity and inclusion, as much as we see games like BG3. And I do expect that sort of like showing to be worse in the next few years because of the long dev cycles. I think that 5 years from now, we're going to see a lot more games like, for example, Stellar Blade, a game I know very little about, but people are always pushing it against sort of like, this is an example of why DEI just doesn't work. Just because people want to see tits and ass, which is, you know, fine. I don't think most of us have an issue with tits and ass, but apparently we do.
Yeah, for some reason. No, big fan.
Yeah, big fan. Like, I love Bayonetta. I think it's all just about how the character like is portrayed, and how like you can do sex in games, like sex appeal. You can do cheesecake even. It's just a matter of like, how is that character portrayed? Are they in their own sort of like bag? Are they in their own sort of like power? Do they have their own autonomy? Like, is this a choice they're making? You know, like it's a lot of the arguments against DEI are really just like, they're one of two things. They're worried about people like that look like them getting pushed out of games, even though half of them play JRPGs where none of the protagonists were aimed to be white anyway, but they see a pale-skinned blonde boy and they're like, yeah, me! Or, which, by the way, that sort of criticism is not true. No one's erasing anyone from the political majority from games. Or two, they're like, you're trying to take away my waifus, you know? Yeah. And it's a little bit tedious, because that's not what we do.
No, not at all. Like, it's the kind of understanding from people who are outraged about, like, again, it's a media literacy problem, like,
which is an intense issue right now.
And just like how politics is not only affecting gaming, but gaming and politics are tied to every tons of other aspects of culture. Like, it's the same when it comes to like media literacy. Like, that is just like an issue that needs to be addressed for multiple
media literacy is an issue no matter what side of the political divide you're on.
That's true.
It's the amount of things that I hear from people like me who are trans or black or whatever. Like, sometimes the discourse on the internet is just like, this character's not a good character because they did a bad thing. And like, maybe that's the point. Maybe that's the point. Right. You know, like, and then you hear from the other side, I'm just like, wow, people are, Nuance is dead.
That's a big part of it for sure. So with, you know, going back to, you know, remembering kind of, you know, you talking about the fact that people can relate to people have been relating to characters that don't look like them. And on the reverse side, like, you know, someone like yourself relating to those characters as well, despite, you know, not being a pale white boy. And, you know, that is something that I think is, you know, again, ties into the media literacy thing. Such a shame, because people are so kind of averse and immediately putting up a wall against something that could really resonate with them. And it's heartbreaking in a lot of ways, because there are some truly great stories that I think could potentially change minds, you know, about like not just the type of work you do, but like a lot of different things. And because the culture war is so ingrained in a lot of people's minds, and there's like zero chance that they're going to even like think a little bit, have a little bit of an open mind.
It is sad. And like I know we're sort of piecing this together from the remains of the interview that died. But like we did talk about rest in peace. We did talk about sort of like how I identified a lot with different characters that were different from me, because the core of characters is humanity, and the core of story is humanity. And you can sort of identify and see bits and pieces of yourself in many characters, regardless of whether they look like you or not. And that's something that people like me, people who are Black, people who are, you know, of differing races and genders, have sort of been doing since media became a thing. Like, I don't look anything like Tara Branford from Final Fantasy VI, but I also see like a woman who is technically biracial, who people view in part as a monster because of what her other half is, which is very pertinent to my life. Like, I think it is a shame that people are so... It's also a weird sort of hypocrisy, because when it comes to story, people are so willing to sort of like dive into the belief that this person who may look like me has super awesome, phenomenal powers and is facing this great evil thing, and identify with that, but not be able to do the same thing if the character happens to have brown skin or Black skin or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's very strange. And also it like, I think a good reference is like how many like Black people fucking love DBZ, how many love Goku, how many love Vegeta. There ain't a Black character in there except Piccolo. I'll die on that hill. Piccolo's Black as fuck. But like, people, they identify with that show. They love that show. There's not a real Black character at all. Like, and it's so strange to me that like that's something that's so common and ingrained in us, but it's not something that like other people can see.
You work obviously in the consulting space, but also you are in the content creation space. So could you just kind of talk top level, kind of what you do in there?
Well, I do. I'm probably most well known for working with Dropout TV, doing improv comedy and tabletop stuff in general. But I also do, the majority of my content is video game streaming, to be honest. So I do a lot of that on Twitch, and things like that, of that nature. A lot of RPGs mainly and stuff like that.
What is the, you know, what has your experience been in the content creation space? Because obviously it's something that is, you know, I understand to be very, especially when you're doing things like Twitch streaming and you know, making, you know, a career out of it. It seems to be a very difficult mountain to climb. What has your experience been climbing that mountain?
It's very difficult. I mean, the like content creation, especially video game streaming, like it can be very difficult. It's a lot of money between games, equipment, all that sort of stuff, microphones and things like that. And then like, there's the other things to climb, like getting an audience. Like, I'm still not the biggest streamer. Basically, like if you don't have an audience from something else, it's very hard to manage growth on Twitch. Little easier on YouTube, but like it can be very difficult to get an audience so that you can like actually have eyes on what you're doing. And it can be even more difficult if you're like of a marginalized group generally. So helps if you're hot. It does.
Yeah. I can imagine.
The harder you are, the easier time you'll have.
It's just
I'm doing about average over here.
Yeah, it's a
Highs and
seesaw.
lows.
Yeah.
You can't be everyone else's type.
What spaces do you? So obviously you said you play RPGs. What kind of spaces do you think? How do I want to rephrase it? I'm not trying to say. I'm trying to say, like, I guess I know you say RPGs, but like in terms of, I have an idea.
Are you trying to ask about sponsors and affiliates and stuff like that?
No, just in terms of like the idea behind the content that you're putting out. Is it simply like I'm playing games and people are along here for the ride? Do you have like an ethos behind what you're making?
So that's sort of what it started as, just because I'll be completely real. I started streaming with having no idea what I was doing. I still not completely sure I know what I'm doing. But it becomes more, yes, I play things that I enjoy, but it's also you take into some account what your audience will enjoy and what they want from you. When you pick games to play, like there's absolutely games that I adore that I will not play on stream, either because I know they won't do well or I already tried and they did poorly. Like Persona 5 Royal, not going to get a lot of views on Twitch. It's a little involved. But like at least at this point, when it first came out, obviously new game releases get a lot more attention.
Sure.
But like generally, I would say my route is not necessarily the most popular route. Like if you want to grow on Twitch, if you really want to grow on Twitch and you like those kind of games, multiplayer games are the way to go. Things like Among Us, Fortnite, shooters, Call of Duty, like those are the things that get a lot of attention. Generally, I stick more towards the single player route because those are the games I like personally, and those are the games that I showcase. And doing commentary along with those are what I do. But if you really want to grow, you really got to do those multiplayer games, those popular multiplayer games.
Interesting. And in terms of curating your audience, obviously from everything that we've talked about, the discourse, the hatred that's out there, do you find that like a lot of people like coming to your streams are, for the most part, genuinely want to be there, generally want to experience? Like, do you have to do a lot of like moderation, or does it kind of
there's plenty of moderation? You remember? Do you remember the Twitch hate raid saga like 2 years ago?
Vaguely, I remember.
Listen,
yeah.
I got so many hate raids, so much hate from that. But generally, the people that come to my streams, for the most part, my actual audience, they are very much here for what I am, what I represent, and the things that I do. I will say I get made fun of a lot because even though I am Black, I'm mixed Black, I'm half white. Sure. But even though I am Black, most of my audience is white queer people. And I get mocked by that for that relentlessly from my streamer friends. I like my audience a lot. I'm at the sort of stage where I have, regular viewership. Like I have the people that come to every stream and stuff like that. It's like, it's very weird. You were talking about ethos. I think I'll give this. My ethos with streaming is to enjoy every level you're at, no matter how little you're watched.
Yeah.
And what I mean is that every single, like, if you take growth in stages, every single stage of growth that you experience as a content creator comes with positives and negatives. The positive, as you get bigger, you get more money, you get more audience, you get more access to resources and stuff to help you stream and help you create. And that's true for any type of content creation, YouTube or otherwise. What goes away is your ability to interact honestly with your audience. The bigger you get, the more closed off you have to be, the more careful you have to be with your audience, the more sort of walls you have to build up to protect yourself. And on top of that, the more pressure is on you to maintain it, which is why I say when you have 1 or 2 viewers, enjoy it. Be as relentlessly you as possible, because just because there are 2 things. 1, it's sad, no one's watching. 2, it's great, no one's fucking watching. You can do whatever the hell you want.
Right.
Period. End of statement.
I love that.
And then as you grow, you start thinking more and more about like what your audience wants to see, who you are, what you want to present. And then it starts to shift towards, being less, not necessarily less you, but presenting the front of you, presenting the brand of you. And that starts to become part of your mentality. And I am at like, if we go from like a 0 to a Jacksepticeye. Let's say that.
Okay.
Like that's the sort of scale. I'm like, if there's like 5 scales in that, I'm at like tier 2 or 2.5, maybe like 2. So like I have an audience. I'm known for doing stuff on Dropout. I have regular Twitch viewership, but it's not very big. Like it's not like, but you're just starting to get to that level of things are starting to kind of get weird with certain audience members. You're having to do a lot more moderation. You're starting to get more attention. You're starting to be more aware of your relationships with people. You're starting to be more careful who you introduce your streamer friends to. You're starting to be more careful about like what you're putting out there. Once you get to tier 3, which I would consider like if you have like 100 concurrent on Twitch, if that's your average, or like you're like about maybe like 100,000 deep on a YouTube subscription type of deal, that's when you get into like the core of content creation. That's when you really have to start picking and choosing one if you're going to continue this, to like what your relationships are with people, who you're going to be around. Like you have to be much more careful about those certain things because everything can affect your audience and also your mental well-being. Once you get to like Jacksepticeye, Markiplier, like all these big names, it's bonkers. And I've met some of these people. I'm not friends with those examples. I'm not going to name my actual friends that are big streamers, but like I'm friends with some of those people. And the layers of not knowing what, like you make a friend normally, like if you're just an everyday person day to day, you don't question whether they want to be your friend because they actually like you or they're after you for clout. They want to use you for this. They want to use you for that. They want to use you for money. Like you don't necessarily have to deal with that. At this level, you do. So that's why I say enjoy every level.
Yeah, no, that's a really good way of putting it. And yeah, it comes with, it just seems that, you know, based on what you say, and obviously like, yeah, it seems that it basically is like, that there's bigger highs, but like the lows are the risk and reward, like both of those things just keep getting ratcheted up. Now you say that you're like at a 2.5. Do you at this point is
more like a 2? Honestly, like a 2. Yeah.
Still though, like the ball is rolling to to climb that. Yeah. Is it a lot of like downhill momentum that it's like, okay, eventually like the work that I have to like put in is because once you hit that top level, like you just throw on a stream, you're gonna have thousands of people watching you. Obviously you're not at that point, but is it, to get to that point, is it just like something that is kind of like slowly like handling itself, or do you still find like you're putting in just as much work now as you were kind of at the beginning of the process?
I will say getting content creation is not just about like who you are, what you present, and the content you make. It's also luck and attention. So like there, like honestly, I say that like with hard work you can get to like tier 2. If you're pretty consistent in doing your research, playing popular games, stuff like that, you can get to where I'm at pretty easily as long as you have the money to invest in like your setup and things like that. You can get there. You can get that audience. Getting beyond that requires a level of luck and also senpai notice me, because I mean most content creators get bigger by collabing with other content creators or getting put on a platform by other bigger content creators. Like my jump from like being super small to like even where I'm at now, which is like 40 concurrent. Sometimes I get as high as 100, but very rarely. Like doing that was my friend Ethan. I did a video with Ethan and fucking everything popped off. Like not even doing Dropout got my numbers that high. So like it's a lot of luck, I think. And also like the thing you have to be aware of to get to that level of like the big ones, you have to be able to and I'm not even sure if I have this, but like you have to have something sort of special or unique to you that will get people's notice. Like, for example, Markiplier played horror games and has a deep voice. That's what got him his first attention. Jacksepticeye, loud, a lot of energy, did games that helped sort of key into that, did a lot of work. Like he was producing videos like every day for like the last like 8 years. I think he just like stopped like a year or two ago. Or even things like you think of like Valkyrie. Valkyrie, I believe, started in like esports and stuff like that. So has that sort of competitive edge and can sort of like use that as a sort of bouncing point. Stuff like that. Like you got to have something that you're providing that's different enough for people to get you noticed. And even with that, sometimes there are people who are fantastic content creators that don't get enough attention. And may never get enough attention. It's not necessarily because what they produce is bad. It's not necessarily because they are bad at what they do. Sometimes they just don't have senpai to notice them. They don't have that boost that they need. So like I always say, like, if you're going to aim in any sort of field or content creation, if you're going to aim to be for the highest, try to aim for what you're going to be happy with. Like always, like be ambitious, be ambitious, go for what you want, always strive for that, but don't get to the point where you're desperate for it, because that may never come. Senpai may never notice you. You may never be a Markiplier. There's very few people in the world that could be a Markiplier, you know, like a Germa or Ludwig, you know, these big time creators. Like, it's very, I don't want to discourage people, just like, or I'm not even trying to encourage people to be realistic, because streaming is not a realistic thing at all. In what way? No way, shape, or form. But what I'm saying is, like, even if you want to be there, you got to enjoy every step to get there.
Yeah.
Like, because you may never get there.
And I think I think that ties in to your previous point of, like, there's a lot to enjoy about it in those beginning early days where it can feel like you're struggling, but it really gives you the freedom to really do whatever you want. And that's awesome.
I have people that have been in my stream almost every time since I started streaming 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, and those are people that I know they have been with me through every step. Yeah. They know who I really am. They know who I am now. Like, and those are the people that I can still, like, talk to, like, as real people.
Yeah.
And be very genuine with. Like, those relationships are very important.
100%.
Like, and as, like, I think some, like, even bigger streamers can point to, like, this wasn't the first viewer that I had that stayed around. You remember that shit. You remember their usernames, even if you don't know them personally. And that's, like, really valuable. I have someone who has been subscribing to my Twitch since I made affiliate.
That's awesome.
Like, I only know how long it's been since I made affiliate because
of that.
His subscribe comes up whenever he posts it. I'm just like, okay, so it's been that many months.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That's
so
awesome.
Like, yeah, and I'm not gonna. It doesn't matter how big I get. I'm gonna remember.
No, of course.
That person.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. No.
So.
Even their importance probably will grow over time as
I mean, they're the ones who remember when you were nothing. You know, like like when you are a speck of dirt. Like they're really important.
Yeah.
And like it's also interesting because I think one of the problems for me is that I am far more, a lot of people don't even realize I Twitch stream. Like a lot of the people, there's not necessarily the best crossover audience between Twitch and Dropout. Because a lot of people know me for Dropout. The number of times people come into my stream and are like, I didn't know you streamed. I'm just like,
how?
There's a reason they post my username with every appearance, bitch. But you know, it's fine.
So speaking of Dropout, we did talk about it a little last time. Obviously, you've done some work with them in the past. You've got some stuff with them coming out in the future, which is exciting, and people should go sign up for Dropout. A lot of people who are listening to this might already be signed up, and we talked about kind of the growth that's site. I'll use for a general term that platform is
no, it's a platform. You can call it a platform. It's a streaming service.
Right.
It's a legit streaming service.
And we were kind of
talking wild to me.
Yeah, and we were kind of talking about how, you know, in a similar vein as to how game studios are kind of finding a lot of roadblocks right now. Streaming services are kind of in a tumultuous time of their own, and how Dropout could be kind of like a beacon for like what a successful streaming service looks like in the future,
especially from an internet-based like so yes, and also they are, because I know that a lot of different companies that have emerged from the internet, like Heyday, for those of you who don't know, Dropout TV is built from the ashes of College Humor. And they're like the first independent streaming service, like from an internet sort of conglomerate, you can call it conglomerate, like a YouTube channel, to take off. And I know that a lot of people have talked to them about it. The one, like, I'm not going to name names except for the ones I've talked about publicly, but the Try Guys went up to Sam Reich and were like, how you do this, when they launched their streaming service. Like it's wild, because I got into the Dropout sort of scene through Dimension 20, which I was very lucky to get in because I was a fan, and I don't know how many fans of like things get to actually be on the show that they're a fan of, but it was pretty awesome. And that was still when Dropout was like smaller. Like they were successful, but like they were smaller. They have grown so big. They are so big now. Like they found their niche, which was improvised comedy, like doing basically unscripted content. They know that brand very well, and all their shows now, there's scripted content on there from when they're first starting out and starting to figure things out. But once they like hit that sweet spot of like, we do unscripted shows, it took off, and it does not show any signs of getting any smaller. And I'm eternally grateful, because that means I get to do stuff.
But people need to go follow you on your various platforms to know that you're
girl,
streaming.
I do a lot. Not everyone knows everything I do.
Yeah.
You know.
I gotcha.
Working in silence like a ninja.
Well, Persephone.
Not really.
Well,
I'm so cringe.
It's all
I'm
good
very
here.
loud.
It's a very welcoming space. There's room for cringe on Hit the Limit Break.
I am. You wouldn't have me if there wasn't.
Nah, exactly.
I really wouldn't.
I wouldn't be doing this if there wasn't either.
Listen, there's another hint. If you're gonna do content creation, I'm still struggling with this. Get comfortable with being cringe.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what's gonna work out.
Yeah.
You really don't.
It's also like, you're so in the moment. Things are live. Like, it's awkward. It can be really awkward at times, for sure. But I think that it's a space that I think that there's a lot of potential for people to see more of you in, which I'm very excited about, and I'm very excited to see these unnamed projects that are in the works. But if people want to find. Here, we're doing a call to action right now. We're going to be very direct about it. This is a call to action. Persephone,
shameless plug here.
Where should people find you? And people should go find you so they can learn about all of these great projects you got coming up.
So I am known as Persephone across the internet. It's my Twitch name. It's my name on Twitter. It's my name on Threads. It's my name on Insta. It's my name everywhere. Unless there's someone doing something heinous, then someone totally stole my account name, which has only happened once thus far. Someone stole my name on Discord, and it's definitely a fan. I'm still mad at them, but everywhere else I'm Persephone.
Fantastic. Well, everyone, go join Persephone, aka Persephone. Thank you for joining us for this week's Hit the Limit Break, and
Thank you for having me.
We will see you next time.
Toodles.